Hi there guys, and thank you for joining me. Friday is here once again. So all you drummers out there getting ready for gigs and stuff at the weekend, have a good one. I'm out on Saturday myself and doing some teaching on Sunday. Once again, thank you for everyone who came on Monday for the Dramatic Masterclass. Still getting some nice feedback, so that's great. It was great fun. Now, one thing I did do at that masterclass was I took some of my vinyl records along. And some people online said, oh, can I buy some of those records? And unfortunately, no, they are mine. None of them are for sale. I've been collecting them for years and I plan on collecting more. There's more sort of classic 50s, 40s, 50s and 60s drummer albums with great album covers with the old Ludwigs and Gretsch and Slingerland drums on there and stuff that I want to buy. Some just for the covers, some for covers and the music, obviously. So so unfortunately not for sale, but why do I take them along? Well, I like it because when I'm doing events like masterclasses and things, it's very much about what I'm bringing to the table. So, and vinyl is a big part of my life, and collecting them as a kid and staring at the covers, which I've talked about before, I know, but that was a big thing for me, and it still is. You know, occasionally when people come around to visit, I'll have some of the records set up along here by the TV. I can't help it, you know, it's my pretend record shop in my head, you know. But anyway, a record that I always take with me, and I'm going to talk about it today on this video. I'm off to the studio shortly, so I haven't got oceans of time today to do this. But I just want to give a little condensed version of this. An album that was in the collection of stuff, only because it was out and I was playing it, was the Gary Numan album, The Pleasure Principle, which looks like this, which I've talked about before. This is the copy that I bought back in 1979 from Boots in Bath. I think there were two Boots at that time, one on the lower part of town and one on the top part of town. And the one down by the bus station sold records, had a big record section. And I remember going in and buying this album, which is Ace. It was the first thing that I really, you know, dug as a kid. I was watching the Monkees. They were showing the reruns on Swap Shop, and I love the Monkees. It was great. And then a year later, John Lennon was shot in 1980. So I discovered the Beatles properly, because before that I didn't really know who they were, and that was a whole different thing. And shortly after that, late in 80 or 81, Dad introduced me to Buddy Rich and Miles Davis and Art Blakey, and you know, it goes from there. But sitting down watching Top of the Pops as a kid, you know, watching this guy come on looking like an android and with that wall of synths, you know, it was just like nothing else. It just freaked me out. It was like, oh my God, this is just the best thing ever. And as I say, this is the original album. It's a bit dog-eared and torn and worn, but it was great. And obviously the drummer, I did a little tribute, which got loads of views actually, on Cedric Sharpley, the guy here, who played drums on this album. Along with, we've got Paul Gardner on bass, Gary, vocals and synths and synthetic percussion and all sorts of stuff, and singing obviously, and Chris Payne on viola and keyboards and stuff. But yeah, this album is just important for me. It's important in many different genres as well. Apparently, a lot of hip hop people got hold of some of these tracks and made things out of these songs. Loads of different people. Anyway, so this is what it looks like. So Cedric I've talked about before, so I don't want to repeat myself, but he was such a big influence on me. And since I posted that YouTube clip, just thanking him really for all he'd done for me and drumming and stuff in that style, loads of people have connected since then. And it's great to see that he had a massive reach. And apparently from people I've spoken to and things I've read, and thanks to Stephen Roper's Living Ornaments channel, the interviews there, he was a very humble guy and he never really thought anything of it. He was just Gary Numan's drummer and that was that. But it was huge, massive influence, those first couple of albums on me. And so anyway, this was at the masterclass. People were saying, why have you got that? And it crept in, but still, it's like, no, this album's great, and I recommend people to go and check it out. You know, the drumming as well. And I was just going to do a very brief little breakdown of why I think this album is worth checking out. Side one, first tune is called Airlane, which is an instrumental, and it starts with synths, obviously, and Cedric playing on the hats. like 16s on the hats. And from the pictures that I can see of the session, he was playing a Heyman kit. It looks like it to me. And I think that's a 24-inch bass drum. I think it's a 13-inch rack tom and a 14 and 16 floor tom, but it could be a 16, 18. It's really hard to tell, but I'm sure it's a Heyman because of the lugs. So it could be like a Vibrasonic or something, because they were very sought after drums. I mean, they were fairly modern back in 1978, 79. That was one of the in kits. Now they're really retro. And I've just managed to source one for a studio owned by John Bucket called Earthworm Studios, which is in Swindon, which I've talked about here a few times. And I sourced a kit from him, from Rock and Music, from up in Rotherham. So he's got one, 22, 13, 16, and matching 5 by 14 by 5 snare drum in gold. And it looks fantastic. One owner for all those years, from 1974. Anyway, so it looks like Cedric is playing a Heyman kit. So maybe some Heyman experts or people that know what sizes they were could tell me. And I've also seen him play the same kit on the Old Grey Whistle Test when he played with his band Druid. And it looks like the very same kit and cymbals to me, without a doubt. But, you know, as I say, I might be wrong, but it looks like 24, 13, 16, 18 floor or 14, 16 floor. Hard to tell. Any Heyman experts out there, let me know. But it sounds great. So it's sort of very sort of Buddy Rich, John Bonham-esque, Ian Pace, classic Mitch Mitchell, 1 rack tom, 2 floor tom setup, which was very popular in the 70s. And in Druid, he was also using timpani and gongs and stuff, you know, and all that kind of thing, which is really cool. But he's just got that setup anyway, without the gongs and everything. I look at those pictures and think, when I hear the album, I think, wow, you know, that is the kit that made this record. I believe that's where those, again, maybe Stephen Roper or someone can source, they tell me where those pictures are from and things like that. But it does really look like it was Marcus AB London, you know, Marcus Music, the studio, which it says on the album where it's recorded. And yeah, so we start on those hats and it's like a real 16th note. And he even does like a little press roll or drag on the hi-hat to add a little bit of extra sauce, which he may not have done live. He may have just played them hand to hand. But it sounds like there's like a little sort of roll or drag, which I'd also heard Ian Pace do on Woman from Tokyo, one of the Deep Purple songs. It's not a 6-stroke roll, it's not as fancy as that. It's just like a little drag, I think, either with the left or the right hand. I'm not sure which way around. I would have done it with my left, but it might be his right. But anyway, that starts off already with a little bit of ear candy, and then some boom, then into the groove, and it really starts to move. And the thing is, there's no guitars on it. There's not one 6-string guitar. The only guitar on it is a bass guitar. And the band are getting all those sounds. Gary's been very clever in looking at a Moog and how to get the sounds out of it, that he doesn't need the sounds that he had on the album over there, Replicas, which I'll talk about another time, to give all the big punk guitar sounds he was getting from a synth. So this song really drives, it really works, and it moves from like 16s on the hats to quavers on the hats, so you get that change pulse of jigga 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 dun 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 dun, you know, between like, you could kind of say A and B section or verse and chorus, so there's no vocals, but from the theme to like a verse section and then back to the chorus section, he uses 2 different elements, which sounds great, and it really, really works. It really kicks the album off with and it's not very long, and it just gives that album that punctuation that it needs to set it off of like, we are here type thing. Track 2, which I think should have been a single after Cars, if I'm honest, though he released the next track after that, Complex. But anyway, this should have been the next single, I think, called Metal, which has got a really cool video as well. But on this, it's like a quaver groove, snare 2 and 4. But what's really cool about this is when he's playing the snare stroke, he slightly opens his hats at the same time. Dum, dum, dum. So you open and close it very quickly with your toes on the pedal, so you get a splash sound, so it toughens up your snare sound. And this is the first track where you hear the synthetic percussion, like the Syndromes, that sound which stayed with me until I found Prince with the Linn drum, and it stayed with me all the way through, that I can't help but use on songs. But it started from hearing the Pleasure Principle, that sound. And I think it also influenced Prince as well to do the very same thing, because he was a big Gary Numan fan. But anyway, and this starts with his use of 3-stroke roughs. When the drums come in, da 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 dum, plenty of reverse, forward 3-stroke roughs, a few quavers in there as well. But ba-ba-da-da, ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, it just drives. Once it's off, this groove doesn't need to change. A few little crashes with the snare and cymbal crash and snare together to emphasize the beat, but no other big fills needed, and of course no ride cymbals across the whole album, because Gary didn't dig ride cymbals. So even though in the picture there's a ride, he never used it, and if that picture is indeed from the Pleasure Principle sessions, which I think it is, so that was redundant by the end. And I'm glad, actually, because you don't really need ride with this music. Hi-hat, it's got all the information you need, and the splashes and the crashes, that's all you need, really. And that groove just motors all the way through the song, and doesn't deviate at all. There's a little break with like a little bass gliss, and then back in again, and it just pounds through. And just a loop of the synths holding that note and Paul Gardner on bass and Ced playing that is just monstrous. It's just like ploughing like through some kind of landscape, some futuristic landscape, these machines coming through and breaking it all down and just driving its way through. Incredible. And Gary sounds great on that as well. But of course, we're here to talk about Ced. So yeah, I was sat down on my practice pad going boom, trying to figure out what sticking I could use. I might have to double up on a right like I just did there, all those kind of things. And of course, then I took that idea and I put it around the drum kit and thought, why do I have to keep it on the snare drum? But that's like one of my concepts anyway, of playing it somewhere, then moving it around and so on and so forth. So Complex, Happening, should have been the next single after Cars. It would have been number 1, I am sure. Then we go to Complex, which was the next single, which is like a ballad with the viola doing its thing. It's beautiful. It's a really beautiful piece of music, I think, with very sort of wanting lyrics from Gary. It's very sad, melancholic. And Cedric on the video is featured quite heavily, as is all of the band in their brilliant black suits and everything, with their two-tone winkle picker boots, like Beatle boots. And Cedric's thing here is tight hi-hat, again, like in Metal and in Airlane, really. And the one-handed 16s that he had to do on Down in the Park and Our Friends Electric. Same sort of thing. And in the video, you can see him really motoring those 16s, and a nice technique with his right hand as well on the hats as he's playing it. He's not getting tired. It's not fixed in one place. I always tell my students to be very fluid with this motion. When you're playing these 16s, your arm has to be relaxed. You can't be tense when you're playing these, because you're playing them for 3 or 4 minutes sometimes, so they just need to flow. And he's got this down and it's very relaxed. And his toms on this sound great. I've always thought that at the end, the fill he plays on these big fat toms just sounds lovely. And I think they're remodes top and bottom by the look of it. So they've got that lovely 70s, early 80s warm sound to them. Really, really nice. Films has been sampled loads. The beat itself, bagat, 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 that loop is just like loops before loops were a thing. It's as iconic, I think, as some of those Clyde Stubblefield, James Brown loops. That those 2 bar sort of loop things are so funky, and I think Films fits right alongside that. It's iconic. The way that's the synth just comes in with the for a little while, you're like, what's going on? And then and it's just relentless all the way through. That loop goes all the way through the song. So machine-like, so in time, so solid. He doesn't deviate. It's a bit like Ringo on Tomorrow Never Knows when he plays that dum, dum, bum, bum. He's playing that groove. The cymbal doesn't give up once. The snare, he doesn't miss the snare once or not rim shot it. Same with the tom. It's just like a perfect loop, like perfect balance. Everything. Same with Cedric on this. It's just great. He doesn't let up once. It could be a machine, but of course it's not. And yeah, I just love that. How many times have I copied that, or the idea of some of the parts of that rhythm? Loads of times. Really nice. And he doesn't do the 16s on the hats. It's just quavers on the hats, which really drives it forward. I mean, if it had been 16s, that would have been cool. We'd be talking about a different kind of feel. But the fact that he's got those these semi-quaver bass drum beats going on over the straight quaver or 8th note hi-hat is just stellar. I love the way you've got those 2 rates working together. It's just funky. It's hip-hoppy before hip-hoppy style was a thing, before hip-hop was a thing. But yeah, awesome. Well worth the check. Me, or M-E, the next track, pretty straight ahead in a way. We've got the ba-boom, cat, ba-boom, cat, ba-boom, cat, quavers on the hats and the ba-boom on the bass drum. Nice feel, sort of slightly behind the beat. You know, whether that was intentional, I don't know, but it creates a tension within the song because the song's got a tension of obviously loneliness and, you know, being the last person alive, you know, with all these machines around or whatever, or even the last machine around. It's all that whole play of the whole thing of loneliness in this sort of dystopian world that Numan likes to create. And it's quite a long tune, and I think Basement Jaxx took a rip of it and sped it up for a song, and I can't think which one. It was one of their hits. I can't remember which one it was. But that's good, and there's some nice fills in it. There's a fill I always talk about at the end, the flam fill. You know, it's right after the last, I think I mentioned it on the Cedric Sharpley show I did a few weeks ago. That fill is just great. It sounds awesome. It's something I used to rip off quite a lot. And I'd forgotten that I probably should still use it, put it back in my armory of drum fills, because it's a classic. So that's great. And that song just does its thing. Long periods of time of doing a similar repetitive thing, which is quite a Numan trait. But again, in drums, you could easily wander and do some fills maybe, or a few on the snare drums, like little roughs and drags. But it would distract and detract from the music. You know, he's so disciplined in knowing exactly what was needed. It's kind of a rock drummer sensibility in this sort of new post-punk, new wave kind of thing. You know, the two don't necessarily work together, but he had enough musical savvy, Cedric, to know, understand and respect for the music and good musicianship to be able to do it. So class playing. Track 2 starts with a song called Tracks. It starts with a beautiful bass and piano thing. Pretty straight ahead. There's some nice fills in this as well. Towards the end, it's very short when Ced comes in. It's only for a short period of time, but it grooves nicely and some driving boom da boom da dum dum boom boom boom, little cheeky open hats here and there. Gives it more of a lesser machine-like feel, more of a human feel, this one. But it is certainly motors, and live. I always love the live versions of this. There's one on Living Ornaments, I think, which is great. So yeah, Tracks, winner. Not much to say about this one. I don't think it is self-explanatory, but it just grooves and it motors nicely. And I love that. And sometimes which was one of the first times I'd heard a drummer do it because I was 9. But it wouldn't just be playing the open hat on the and, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, you know, or anywhere along that line, you know, any of the ands, you can play that open hat. But sometimes he'd do a reverse 3-stroke rough. And I remember the way he played it was, you know, again, slightly behind the beat, you know, and it'd be like, oh, did I hear an extra note in there? Was there that extra note in between the 4 and the and? Yes, I think that sounds great, you know, and he probably put it in there and thought, I get away with that, you know, a bit of drumminess there. Or maybe he didn't, I don't know, but maybe it's just a natural thing that happened that when they listened back, they went, great. Because it's not over the top, it's not like some massive drum fill, it's quite a tasteful little thing, you know, but I've obviously years of listening since then, I've heard Steve Gadd and Dave Weckl and, you know, whoever do that thing. But, and I use it, and I've kind of stolen it from Ced because I think it's a really cool thing to put in every now and again that you can get away with. And it sounds awesome when you're working with, you know, with singers and stuff, and they just need something in that space. So every now and again, there's a variation that just works nicely. We could do it with 2 hands, but it's easier with one. It just flows nicer with one. Track 2 on side 2 is a song called Observer, which is great. That kind of just does its thing. Again, it's another one of those tracks that his musical sensibility just tells him what to do. And it's like a loop. Boom, da dum, do gaga, dum, da dum, do gaga, ba boom, da dum, da ga, dum. And again, towards the end of this one, he does that on the hats. It's really funky. It does the same loop, but they sort of break it up. The groove of bum, ba dum, bum, ba dum. Boom, ba-dum. You know, that kind of thing goes on. But towards the end, they break it up, and you've got Paul Gardner playing more dum 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 dum, almost like funky, not slap, but he's getting funky. And they do a little moment, whether it was rehearsed or just happened, where he goes dum 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 on the bass, and that's exactly the time when Ced goes dum dum on the hat. So it may have been choreographed, I don't know, but it's just like one of those moments when I hear it, it's like, yo, yeah, man, yeah, boy. It's just so cool. It's just brilliant. Observer's not a track he played live very often at all, I don't think. Only on that anniversary tour that he did a few years ago of 30 years of Pleasure Principle or whatever it would have been. Conversation, Straight Ahead Groove. This is a very long track. So again, this machine-like quality. Ced's got in loads of that. He's got it in spades, as they say. And I like the bit on this one, again, with open hi-hat going on to one of his rack toms. Dum, dum, well, he only had one at the time. Dum, gung, this 1 and 2 and 4 and, putting the tom on there, which is kind of a Mick Fleetwood kind of vibe, going up to the toms like that, or Levon Helm or someone. And of course, Ringo would have done a similar thing. But it just sounds great. And again, this absence of any ride cymbal taking up all that bandwidth of shh is brilliant. This is a song where you could have maybe have done it just to change some of the sections up, but no, ride cymbal, band, not good. So he's on the hats, and he just keeps that whole feeling of that tension going all the way through this track. With some nice fills at the end, nothing fancy, just 60th note fills around the kit. Sometimes starting with a flam, he used to do that as well. But yeah, just steady, consistent, machine-like krautrock style of kind of drumming, just class. Then Cars, of course. I mean, Cars is a classic. Boom, da, boom, boom, da, boom, boom, da, boom, boom, da, boom. That little, 4E on the bass drum is just wicked. I love that coming in. It's a funk groove. It is dancey. People were saying, I've talked to people who said, oh man, that Gary Numan dude, that Cars, when I first heard it, like in 1980, it would have been in America. It's 1979 here. I think they got it late 79, early 80. And people, doing the dancing to it, the street dance to it and stuff, because they just thought it was so funky. And I think, I was talking to somebody, or maybe I saw it on a documentary, one of those hip hop documentaries, and they thought he was black or something. He was like, hey, this guy's so cool. Where did this come from? And he was from like London, and he wasn't. He was far from that, and it's like, wow, he kind of got into that culture. And I think that's when Numan first heard him as well. Prince first heard him as well. So Cars, yeah, classic. The fills towards the end, again, just going around the toms, just tasteful, it's just all the things that it needs to be. And I think at the end of Conversations, there's like almost a Ringo-esque type thing on the floor toms where he plays like demi-semis, fast demi-semis on the floor as it fades out. I'm sure I seem to remember that coming on, and I thought, ooh, bit of speed going on there from Ced. That's kind of nice. And then the last one, Engineers, which I spoke about on the last clip, which is very much like a marching dum ding ding on the snare drum. It starts with a press roll. And I remember thinking when I was learning my press roll or double stroke roll, whichever he was using, listening to that, thinking, oh, that's what I need to be doing. Thanks, Ced. I need to be learning that. You've helped me to think that it's not such a boring rudiment after all. And of course, you think all this at 9 and 10 years of age. You don't realise how important press rolls and double stroke rolls are to you, and they're majorly important. So there we go. So that's like a little breakdown of the tracks. It's very brief, I know, very quick, but they're the main core points that you could pick out from his drumming on this record. As I say, it's consistent, it's tasteful, it's musical, it adds tension to the music, adds colour when it needs to. But I think that tension is important because this dystopian kind of future thing that he was singing about, and the synths and the coldness of all of that. As I say, a ride cymbal wouldn't work, or a splash cymbal, and over the top playing wouldn't have worked. He clearly could have done it, but he's so musical with his choices. And I don't think, from what I can tell, that Gary ever had to tell him not to do something or to do something. I think pretty much Gary said that whenever he played him something, Ced was pretty much like on it, and he was like, yeah, maybe one or two things, but it was just like, you've got it. You got the DNA of this song. Let's go record it, which is awesome. And we'll talk about Telecon, which is another one, which is another classic, which came after this in 1980. And I'll also talk about, at some point, the other albums that Cedric didn't play on, which was Tube Army, the first one, and Replicas, which is the one that's just over there above my leady bass drum, poking its head out. That was Jez Lydiard, who I think was Gary's uncle. I'm sure it was. But anyway, thank you, Cedric, once again. And I'm in conversations with Stephen Roper at Living Ornaments. Hopefully we can get together and have a chat about some Cedric-related stuff, But more about that in the future. Who knows what's going to happen there? I've got some ideas, and hopefully we can get together on something which could actually be really cool. So anyway, Pleasure Principle. It's worth having in your collection, worth checking out if you're any kind of musician, but if you're a drummer, definitely worth checking out. If you've got a singer saying to you, oh, or an engineer or a producer friend saying, you play a bit too much, mate, you want to lay back, these are the sort of albums you want to listen to. You know, give this a little listen, because this is like one of the first albums that inspired so many other things. So again, thank you, Cedric, and thank you, Gary, of course. Okay, so thank you for watching. Have a wicked Friday, great weekend. I'm off to go to the studio and I'm running a little bit late, so I better get my skates on. If you've got any comments to make about this album or Cedric, please leave the comments below, or you can email me. Thanks for subscribing and liking and sharing. I'm nearly up to 1,000 subscribers, so thank you. Have a great weekend, guys, and I'll see you soon. Cheers, bye.